Artlist.io. Music licensing reimagined.
Oh, baby. Hopefully, this time this recording works out a little bit better, but the lights are on bright. It is time to dance. Welcome to the show you live for. It is ginormous. Now, this is something that I have been wanting to do for a little bit, something that I've been eyeing, and I've been trying to figure out exactly where to start because when you're looking at classic pay per view reviews for WWE, you just have so many to choose from. There are so many different time periods, so many different eras, so many different things that would appeal to different people and different fans. Because with the WWE audience, there are some fans who grew up in the era of Hulk Hogan and the Golden Era, and that's really what they're interested in and what they like. There are a lot of people who grew up in the Attitude Era who like Stone Cold Steve Austin, who like The Rock, who like that sort of era and characters there. And there are some people who, in my case, which I grew up in, was the ruthless aggression era where John Cena and Batista really ruled the roost and were kind of the two main focal points as far as the world championships are concerned on those respective brands, Raw and SmackDown. So, what I chose to do in a start off point was something that I am pretty comfortable with. I'm talking about the Ruthless Aggression era, Judgment Day 2005. Now, this is a very well known pay per view. There are a lot of noteworthy things that happen, a lot of big time storylines going on. And this specifically is in the era where Raw and SmackDown had two separate pay per views or separate branded pay per views. So you will not be in this show seeing anybody from the Raw roster on this pay per view. This is a SmackDown exclusive, and I really do think, actually, I know this is a little off topic, but I do think that this is something that WWE in the current day could really use to allow a lot more people to get opportunities, to get exposure, and for everybody overall just to look a little bit stronger. But we are talking about the current day. And once again, I would just like to give everybody a thank you for your support. Let everyone know how much their support means to me. And I would just like to give a little bit of a warning, kind of a trigger warning. There is some stuff, and WWE back then was a lot different in terms of the sensitivity they had and kind of the edginess in the product at the time. There is a lot of stuff that if you go back and choose to watch this pay-per-view that you may be offended by, and that a lot of people, I think, in today's standards would deem some of the contents of this show to be unacceptable. So I would just like to say, if you're listening to this and you do choose to give Judgment Day 2005 a watch, I would just like to give everyone a forewarning. I am going to leave I'm not going to leave things out necessarily, but I'm going to kind of beat around the bush because I don't really want to go and use certain language or use certain terms that would really kind of be used to describe the time period of, or this era and this time period of this show, this program, this pay per view. There are just a lot of things that, by today's standard, that would be deemed unacceptable that I'm not necessarily going to deeply dive into in the interest of keeping this a fairly kid-friendly show. I know I swear sometimes. I know sometimes I make analogies that aren't exactly appropriate, but I would like a general audience to be able to view this show and not have to worry about, listening or hearing things that they wouldn't want their kid to hear. So, without further ado, my friends, let's get into this. I'm very excited to do this. So, first off, we have the tag team champions, Eminem, Joey Mercury, and Johnny Nitro, taking on kind of the slapdash team of Hardcore Holly and Charlie Haas. So, kind of the build to this show was Hardcore Holly, Charlie Haas owned pinfall victories individually over the tag team champions in singles matches, so therefore they have earned this opportunity. Now, Eminem around this time period is very new. They defeated Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero. We will get into them later. They defeated Rey and Eddie, pardon me, for the tag team championships in their debut, which was a big shocker, but it was all part of a bigger storyline where Eddie Guerrero allowed Rey Mysterio to get beat up and they lost out on the tag team championships. So the question was from the fan base and the challenge to the writing team is, where does Eminem go from here now that they're separated from the Eddie and Rey storyline? And the answer is, you take two veterans, you kind of put them together who kind of their styles do kind of mesh well, I do suppose. You put them together, you take two veterans who aren't really doing too much, put them in a tag team, and let them kind of work with these young challengers, these young up and comers, and let's see what they can do. Make them sweat a little bit. And you know what? This match blew me away. Now, WWE has a huge habit, especially, honestly, throughout their whole entire, not even specifically for any time period, this can really go for any time. So they have a big habit of taking two veterans who aren't necessarily doing anything at that period in time, putting them together, seeing if they can make do as a tag team, and if it works, then they go with it. If it doesn't work, then they just go somewhere else. And obviously, in the long term scale, Charlie Haas and Hardcore Holly did not do anything substantial. But if there's one thing that they can be proud of, it is this match. I said it before, this match blew me away. Near falls, a lot of great back and forth counter wrestling, very competitive, and the young guys really showed that they could hang with the veterans, and it was really a launching off point for them because, of course, they won from two Hall of Famers and Eddie and Ray, but they didn't necessarily have a sustained run. Their brand's making new. They won the tag team championships right off the bat, so they started off on such a high that unfortunately it looked like they could really only go down from here, but that's not the case. They kept that level of intensity, they hung with the veterans, and they proved their worth, and they showed that they belong. There were near falls in this match that the crowd was really into. By the way, the crowd for this match and most of the show was magnificent. Specifically for this opener, it was outstanding. There isn't a lot specifically like of kind of pomp and circumstance with it. It was just four guys in a ring having a really good tag team match where they just got in there, they wrestled, there wasn't too much of a story, and you know what? The crowd bought into it. And a lot of times, especially in WWE, you're going to need somewhat of a story. There really wasn't too much to this, but it worked. The crowd loved it. I was into it. And for each and every match that I go over, I'm going to give it a something out of a 5-star rating. When a lot of people go over matches, they give it out of 5 stars, kind of like a movie, and that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do the same thing here, and you know what? I'm gonna give this 4 stars out of 5. This is a hidden classic. This is a hidden gem, and I really recommend. Even though people may not be on paper, this match does not look exciting. I urge you, look at this match, watch it back. You will not be disappointed, and I guarantee you will get some sort of excitement out of it coming towards the end. So that's what I really have to say on that. It's very, for those people who don't know, it is very, very important for a pay-per-view premium live event for it to start well and to end well. If the stuff in the middle isn't all that great, of course that's not ideal, but if you can say that the show opened up well and the show ended well, or at least one of those things, then you know what? At least you have some sort of highlight coming out of the pay-per-view, and that's really what I have to say. This was a great way to open the show. Get the crowd ready, get the crowd excited, and you know what? I'm all for it, and I might just watch it back the second I say thank you to everybody and hang up on this show. So next, I'm going to go to Carlito versus The Big Show. That was next on the card. I'm going in order on this, so the main event will be the last thing that I review. But this is Carlito versus The Big Show. Obviously something that is kind of a placeholder feud for now. But the bigger story going into this, and especially around this time, 2005, Vince McMahon had control over SmackDown, and he wanted to kind of go from the smaller, mat-based, more athleticism that Paul Heyman at the time was kind of catering towards in the SmackDown 6 era, the fast-paced, exciting. Vince McMahon took back over creative on SmackDown, and he wanted the big, muscly, lumbering guys. To their credit, some of them worked out well. Of course, look at Brock Lesnar. You can say Nathan Jones for a little bit had some promise, but you know what? He ended up being terrible, so much so that he had to be scrapped from WrestleMania altogether. And, you know, a lot of these guys did not really work But one guy who did work outside of WWE, who they're trying to get over at this point in time, is Matt Morgan. Now, Carlito had just debuted in 2004. He was the United States champion, and he was somebody who played his role really well. You know, he was kind of a snickering heel, somebody who was able to get under the skin of a lot of good guys. And his main gimmick was he did not like people who were not cool, and if he did not find you cool, he spit an apple in your face. And after a while, that got old. He got under the skin of the wrong people. So Carlito enlisted the services of big man Matt Morgan. Now, Matt Morgan was kind of handcuffed really badly with a gimmick right off the bat of being kind of having a speech impediment, having a really bad stutter. But there's little doubt that his physical stature was extremely impressive. He had to have been upwards or close to the range of 7 feet tall, and he could move pretty relatively well. He had really good athleticism for a man his size, and he just had a great look to him. So what we would call is he would pass the airport test. The airport test is if you walk through the airport, there's a million people, you don't notice anybody. If you stop and look at somebody because somebody stands out in the crowd, that means you pass the airport test. That's what Matt Morgan did. And he had all the tools to be a good superstar. Eventually, like I said, in TNA, he did become a solid hand there, somebody who made a little bit of an impact, no pun intended. But I think at this point in time, Matt Morgan was just so new. He was green as baby bloop, and he unfortunately never really found his way. But this was the beginning stages of Matt Morgan, and there was really nothing noteworthy in this match. It was kind of your classic David versus Goliath battle, where honestly though, Goliath was the good guy and the sympathetic person. So kind of a little bit of a mix-up there, but not necessarily in a bad way. The match was what it was. It wasn't anything bad. It told its story, and in a pay-per-view, even though every match may not be magnificent, even though it may not steal the show, if it told a story well, then you know what? It executed, it did something, and it served its purpose. And that's what this match was. The Big Show dominated for most of the match. Carlito got a couple of shots in, but the story was Carlito was not going to win unless he had the services of Matt Morgan. Excuse me, and that is what ended up happening. There was an opening in the match. Matt Morgan came in. He hit the Big Show with an F5, which was clearly an FU to Brock Lesnar, who had left in 2004. They were clearly trying to pass that move on to someone else. That was a short-lived run. But for that time period, Matt Morgan hits the F5 on the Big Show. Carlito gets the pin for the upset win. And look, again, nothing really magnificent, nothing that really stood out about this. And after a while, we found out that because of Matt Morgan's departure, it was really much to do about nothing. But at the time, the crowd was really impressed with Matt Morgan and his strength and his ability to really make himself look imposing with a guy like the Big Show going across from him. And you know what? For that reason, I give it 2.5 stars out of 5. I really think, once again, it served its purpose. It did what it was supposed to do. And you can't really complain too much more other than that, especially on a long show like this. So, yeah, 2.5 stars out of 5. Next, I'm going to go for the Cruiserweight Championship. I'm going to go with Paul London versus Chavo Guerrero. Now, the champion was Paul London, Chavo Guerrero, kind of similar to what I was saying with the Tag Team Championships. Chavo Guerrero did have some pinfall victories over Paul London, and this is what made him earn the championship match. So this is what we have. It is Paul London versus Chavo Guerrero, one-on-one singles, straight up for the Cruiserweight Championship. And you know what? It wasn't a bad match. There really wasn't too much to write home about on this one. There really wasn't anything remarkable. Chavo took most of the match. Kind of sounds similar to what I'm saying in this last one, except David versus Goliath. David is actually the good guy this time. This was, in terms of a cruiserweight match, slower pace than what we had come to expect, and there's nothing wrong with that, because cruiserweights are diverse. Just because somebody is a little bit smaller doesn't mean they necessarily have to be somebody who does flips and have extreme athleticism every 5 seconds and really have to showcase that. There's nothing wrong with a methodical cruiserweight, somebody who slows the match pace down and takes somebody who likes to use that high octane offense kind of off of their game. That's what Chavo Guerrero was doing. That was the story that was being told. And look, there was nothing. There was nothing wrong with it. It was definitely, like I said, definitely had its place, but there really wasn't much of a story to this. Chavo Guerrero kind of was at this point going to get himself involved in some other things later on in this show. Spoiler alert. And again, this just really wasn't high up on the priority list. It felt like with WWE at the time. So for that reason, I'm gonna give this 2 stars out of 5. Paul London ended up winning this match, but once again, like there really wasn't anything to write home about on this, and that's really what this match is gonna be. It's highly forgettable, a perfectly fine way to spend 8 to 10 minutes, but nothing that you're gonna feel any differently about, other than coming off at the other end of it. So, this is where I'm going to get into a little bit of the disturbing part of this show. And again, I'm not going to be going into it in a big way. I'm not going to be saying a lot of the things that happened or using any sort of trigger words because, again, I just do not want anybody who is going to be listening to this show to feel any type of way, to feel as though they end up feeling a lot worse. But we're going to move on to Booker T versus Kurt Angle. And again, I'm just going to say this, highly sensitive storyline, and this day and age, nowhere near acceptable. Kurt Angle had a thing for Booker T's wife. He went crazed and he expressed his desire to be intimate with Queen Charmel, Booker T's wife, and it drove Booker T crazy. He made a lot of advances, bought lingerie, really just went on this goose chase for Queen Charmel to get under the skin of Booker T, and he in this pay per view, there was a kind of a show long story before this match went on of Kurt Angle still stalking Queen Charmel and buying lingerie, still searching, and making Booker T leave the locker room that Booker T was in to be in search of Kurt Angle. And right before the match started between the two, Kurt Angle, not non graphically, but Kurt Angle forced himself onto Queen Charmel. He covered her mouth and spoke very seductively in an uncomfortable way to Queen Charmel, which kind of made him get the upper hand and got the better. But you know what? It's very uncomfortable viewing when you're looking back at the career highlights of these two men, and through no fault of Booker T. He's just doing what he was told. But especially when you're looking through the career highlight of Booker T, I'm sorry, Kurt Angle, this is not going to be something that is showcased because, again, just due to the uncomfortable nature of it's just not going to be shown. So, anyways, let's just get into the match. My number one complaint about it, for something that is so deeply personal, for something that is so high emotion, this match should have been no disqualification. There should have been some sort of stipulation for the story that was going into this, that was going on, how personal, how uncomfortable it was. There is no reason why there should not have been some sort of stipulation to this match to add to the intensity of it. And it ended up just being a one-on-one match, which I really think just a traditional, like I said, a traditional one-on-one match that had happened in the rest of these matches previously in the show. And for that reason, I really think that this match suffered. Again, these are two legends. These are two Hall of Famers. Somebody that, of course, we are going to be more than happy to celebrate anytime we look back at their careers. Two celebrated legends, two former world champions, world-class athletes, and Hall of Famers. But again, when it's this much heat, this much intensity going into the story, and then the match is just kind of a basic one-on-one match, then yeah, it's going to suffer between these two men. There's going to be an issue, and there's going to be a reason why this doesn't reach its full potential. And great, look, it was fine. Like at the end of it, they really got the crowd into it. The crowd was really invested towards the end, which I guess is the important part. There's nothing wrong with a slow building, methodical match that kind of peaks at the end. That's what you want, ideally. But again, the crowd was kind of bloodthirsty. They weren't really looking for this Matt Classic. They weren't really looking for this kind of like slugfest. They were looking for a stipulation brawl and a big fight. And that's not really what they got. And For that reason, it's two legends. They know what they're doing out there, but I'm going to give this only 3 stars out of 5. I think, again, for the story that was told, there was not enough emotion going into it, and the match really suffered because of it. And that's going to be my rating for this. And yeah, sorry, I don't really know what to tell you. Again, I respect the hell out of these two wrestlers, competitors, for what they are, but I did not like this match, and out of respect for the both of them and for the way that they were able to get the crowd into it towards the end, I really think that that kind of helped the star rating, but this should have been in the 4-star range, and you know what? Through no fault of these two, it's going to suffer. And that's really what I have to say. So let's move on. So, next is the United States Championship between Heidenreich and Orlando Jordan. And I made myself chuckle saying that because I don't want to spend too much time on this, because this match, my friends, was god awful. It was monkey butt, bowling shoe ugly, and yeah, a lot of rest holds, nothing really of note. And the story was Heidenreich got a win over Orlando Jordan, and that earned him this championship match. Very basic storytelling, as you can tell, it's kind of been the theme. But again, this match was just extremely boring. There was nothing really redeeming about it. And for that, I'm going to give it a 0.5 star out of 5. And I think that's a little bit of a generous rating if we're going to be completely honest. I think this match could have easily gotten 0 stars out of 5, but I'm going to give it a half because at the end of the day, I do think Heidenreich is a little bit funny unintentionally because he's just so bad. But yeah, 0.5 star out of 5. I don't really want to give this too much more time than it has to be. So yeah, 0.5 star out of 5. So, going into the next match, there are going to be a lot of similarities between this match and the match I just talked about with Booker T and Kurt Angle. And we are talking about Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero at Judgment Day. Now, the rivalry that these two men have is so well documented, it is so personal, and it ended up being, with the blow off match, the custody of Dominic Mysterio, who is now currently present day the Intercontinental Champion, but it is for the custody of Dominic Mysterio. It all started off at WrestleMania, where it was a friendly competition, one-on-one between Rey and Eddie, and Eddie became obsessed with the fact that he wasn't able to defeat Rey Mysterio, so he went to these extreme lengths. He tried to brainwash Dominic Mysterio into thinking that Eddie was his real father, which, you know what, I truly do believe that Eddie Guerrero is the father of Rey Mysterio, but nonetheless, this match is deeply personal. It's coming off of a brutal spot on SmackDown where Eddie Guerrero suplexes Rey Mysterio and drops him with a brainbuster onto the steel steps, which, oh man, that's ugly to look at to this day. But going into this match, it was a little bit slower, a little bit more methodical than what you would expect. And clearly, these two were kind of leaving a lot in the tank, not showing their full cards. And again, it was a good match. It's impossible for these two to have a bad match per se, but I think when you're looking back in the history of this rivalry, you're not really going to talk about this one this much. This one isn't very talked about that much at all. And, for good reason, because again, it's not bad, it's not horrible, but these two, again, have such a deep personal history that a one on one match does not lend itself well. There's really no reason for this match to have been just a straight up one on one match. And again, I think the match did kind of suffer for it. Obviously, they had a big stipulation coming up in the woodworks with the custody of Dominic, so I understand why you wouldn't want to have this massive thing. But again, having zero stipulation, I think was a mistake, and I think kind of did have this match suffer a little bit from it. And for that reason, once again, I'm going to give it 3 stars out of 5. Again, it was not a bad match. I don't look at it negatively like I look at the Booker T versus Kurt Angle. But again, I do think that there were a lot of things that could have been done for this match, particularly that would have helped it out and increased the star rating. There are a lot better ones in their feud. This one, especially, also ended in disqualification, which nobody likes. And it's a pay-per-view match. I guess I get it. You have to leave some things in the tank, especially if you want the show and you want the rivalry to continue. But again, at this point in time, people were paying $50 to $60 a pop for these pay-per-views, and two of their premier superstars that they came to see in a personally deep rivalry aren't even going to have a true conclusion to the match just because they want you to pay for the next one. And again, it's WWE. It kind of comes with the territory, but that doesn't mean we have to like it. And I do not like the fact that this match ended in disqualification. It made Eddie look stupid. He grew obsessed with not being able to defeat Rey Mysterio, and he intentionally got himself disqualified, which made him lose to Rey Mysterio. So it made Eddie Guerrero look stupid, and that's why, again, it was a great match, but no stipulation, and kind of the finish, I give it 3 stars out of 5 for that reason. So, going into the main event, it is John Cena versus John Bradshaw Layfield. Now, this is a match based off of JBL's jealousy and kind of feeling himself like in the spotlight, kind of slipping away, his time not really being there anymore. So, JBL beats up John Cena, takes the old championship because John Cena had just debuted the spinner belt, the new WWE championship, and he made that his own. JBL is taking the classic WWE championship that he held for a long time, and he is kind of making that his little token, to kind of have John Cena under his skin. And for that, JBL did some great character work, and this match is an I Quit match between these two. And it is the big blow off. After this, John Cena moves on. And this match, again, for obvious reasons, this one does not have, any predatory or any kind of trying to take somebody's son, like kidnapping, but it is deeply personal and it is deeply intense. And I do not suggest you eat your dinner while watching this match, because there's a reason why not a lot of people, especially up in WWE when they're showing the career highlights of John Cena, there's a reason why not a lot of people talk about this match or bring it up. And that's because this match is insanely bloody. It is insanely violent. And again, for those people who kind of don't like blood, get uneasy by it, you're not going to want to watch this match. But I'll tell you this, that does not take away from this match's quality whatsoever. This match was brutal. This match was bloody. This match was violent. It had a lot of vicious spots to it. John Cena's entrance coming out in that huge Mack truck was really cool. It kind of set the tone. And it really lended itself, obviously, to the finish of the match, where John Cena takes off the exhaust pipe and is going to smash JBL through the glass window. And JBL says, I quit, to kind of save himself from any further damage or injury. But, John Cena does it anyway. And again, it was a great bloody match. It was something, again, that is kind of sort of a lost classic. Something that is not really going to be brought up, especially by today's standards, as the product is more PG and does their best to avoid any sort of like bloodiness or any sort of this type of gruesomeness, where it really is uncomfortable, because there's choking in this match, kind of like strangling with like jumper cables or wires. That's just really not the type of stuff that you see anymore. That's not really the type of competitiveness or matches that the company promotes. So this is kind of something of a forgotten era, but that doesn't make it any less good. It's violent, it's brutal, it's deeply personal, and it truly feels like the final battle between two gladiators who have had their way with one another and are going head to head in this vicious blow-off war. And that's what it feels like. John Cena ended up winning this match, as I had said, and it really established himself. And John Cena had already established himself as a main eventer up to this point, but this, I would say, truly cemented John Cena as the guy, the main event guy. He defeats JBL once and for all in a brutal way, the only way that could happen in an I Quit match from this era. And you know what? I think it was great. And for that reason, I give it 4.5 stars out of 5. Again, I do not suggest that you eat yourself a ham sandwich while watching this match, because it is brutal, it is bloody, and it is something that if you have a weak stomach, you are not going to like. But I like it a lot. Again, I think that it's truly just so intense, and I'm all for it. I'm in support of it. I like it, and it's something of a lost era, and for that, I appreciate it. So overall, Judgment Day 2005, I think, was a good show. Again, like I said, kind of in the beginning of this, if you are going to have a pay-per-view, if you're going to have a show At the very, very least, you want a good beginning and a good ending. And if we're talking about fundamentally what you want in a pay per view, that's exactly what this match had. It had a fantastic beginning and it had a fantastic end. And in the middle, there was one absolutely horrible match for the United States Championship with Heidenreich and Orlando Jordan. There was a couple filler matches, Paul London and Chavo Guerrero, and then Carlito versus Big Show. None of which I found to be offensive, but none that I found to be remarkable either. And then you had the matches with King Booker and Kurt Angle, and then Ray versus Eddie Guerrero, where I think that they were fine matches. I think that they were good, but I don't necessarily think that they kind of lived up to the hype that the two superstars on paper suggested that they could live up to. I just don't think it reached that level. And again, it's not really a knock on the competitors involved, but I really do think that the stipulations that surrounded it, or lack thereof, really kind of hurt it. And I will say, with Ray and Eddie Guerrero, again, I get it. You had the custody of Dominic kind of in your back pocket, so you didn't want to give away too much. So I do understand in a way where they were coming from there, but I don't understand with the Booker T and Kurt Angle storyline with something so personal, so just really kind of gross by today's standards, how you don't have a more personal thing than that. Maybe they were thinking that you didn't want to have it because of the main event also being personal and brutal, but to me, that's no excuse for this match between these two to suffer. I mean, man, the man's coming after your wife. You're not trying to have a technical classic with him. You're trying to beat his ass. It just bluntly put. But yeah, so overall, I give this show a B minus. Once again, I think that it was good. I like it, but there are definitely some flaws in the middle that held it back from being a lot better than it could have been. And that's the reason why I give it a B minus, because it fundamentally was what a pay-per-view should be, but there were a lot of missed opportunities there that I truly believe that if a couple of things would have changed, this would have been a high B, low A pay-per-view. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this, because what fun is it for me to go to a blatantly horrible show and just rag on it? Or, honestly, what good is it for me to go to a great show, like awesome, amazing show, and just sing the thing's praises, because everyone knows how good those things are. And you know what? The shows that people know are great, and the ones that are highly revered and highly loved, those people and the people who review them, so many videos there, so many reviews on it, that at this point it would kind of just be like me just going to the well one more time for something that is already dried out. So yeah, that's why I chose to review Judgment Day 2005. Kind of an under-the-radar show. And, I think this was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun watching it. And it was a good run of nostalgia for me as well, because this is when I grew up watching the WWE. So guys, once again, I would just like to say thank you. I would definitely like to do another one of these formatted shows in the future. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I really like getting the chance to going back, looking at the WWE during the time period that I watch it, and kind of just seeing what was going on and looking at it through kind of a lens of the past. It really is fun for me, and I really hope that you guys as listeners enjoyed it, and it was fun for you guys as well. So, I would just like to say once again, everybody, thank you so much for your love. Thank you so much for your support. This has been Ginormous. There's a lot more to come, and honestly, I'm going to be in Michigan next weekend, so there are no promises that next weekend I will have a Ginormous, the 20th episode, but I will try during the week to get another Ginormous episode in. I'm going to the Big House for Michigan versus Wisconsin, so that's going to be a fun game. I'm going up with some of my buddies, and it's a trip that I've been looking forward to for a long time. So, again, no promises that I will have a Ginormous next weekend, but I promise you guys I will try my best to get one this week. And what I realized is I did not say the date. It is September 28th, 2025. Guys, have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your week. This has been Ginormous.